The amber lights of Anchor Point Bar cast long shadows across worn wooden floors that had endured decades of military boots. Thursday evening brought the usual crowd, active duty personnel still in uniform mingling with veterans who wore their service in their posture rather than their clothes. Classic rock played at a volume that allowed conversation without shouting, the playlist seemingly unchanged since Desert Storm. Michael Sullivan sat alone at the far end of the bar, nursing a neat bourbon. At 58, he carried his age with the dignified weariness of a man who had seen too much but refused to be broken by it. His silver-gray hair was still cut military short, and despite the slight stiffness in his right hand, a remnant of old wounds, his posture remained impeccable. The deep lines around his blue eyes spoke of both laughter and grief in equal measure. What made him stand out tonight wasn't his solitary presence or the respect bartender Jake Williams showed by keeping his glass quietly filled. It was the bouquet of fresh flowers resting on the bar before him, white lilies and blue forget-me-nots arranged with military precision, that drew curious glances from the regulars. Jake, a 45-year-old former Army Ranger with forearms tattooed with unit insignias, wiped the counter near Michael. 15 years today? He asked quietly, nodding toward the flowers. Michael's weathered fingers traced the rim of his glass. Blackwater. The single word hung between them, weighted with unspoken history. Jake nodded and moved away. Some memories demanded space. The door swung open, bringing in a gust of October air and a group of 6 Navy SEALs still riding the adrenaline high of a successful training mission. Their laughter cut through the bar's subdued atmosphere, drawing attention from the other patrons. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Foster led the group, his athletic frame and confident stride marking him as their leader even without the visible rank. At 35, he'd already built a reputation as one of the most promising SEAL officers of his generation. His dark eyes scanned the bar with the automatic situational awareness drilled into every operator, pausing when they landed on Michael. Recognition flashed across his face. He murmured something to his team before approaching the bar, stopping a respectful distance from Michael's seat. "Dr. Sullivan?" Foster's voice carried the precise balance of confidence and respect. "I thought that was you. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Foster, SEAL Team 4. Michael looked up, his expression neutral but assessing. "Lieutenant Commander, your lecture at Bethesda last year on battlefield trauma response saved lives during our Yemen extraction." Foster's words were measured, genuine. "My corpsmen modified our medkits based on your recommendations." A ghost of a smile touched Michael's lips. "Glad to hear it." Captain Carol Hayes, the only female member of Foster's team, approached with measured steps. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a regulation bun, her posture radiating the natural authority of someone accustomed to proving herself in male-dominated spaces. "So you're the legendary ghost surgeon," she said, skepticism edging her tone. "The stories they tell about you at the academy seem embellished." A subtle tension rippled through the bar. Jake paused his glass polishing, eyes narrowed. Foster shot Hayes a warning glance before turning back to Michael. "Forgive Captain Hayes. She's new to the team and hasn't learned when to maintain tactical silence." Michael studied Hayes with the same clinical detachment he'd use examining a complicated wound. "Skepticism is healthy, Captain. Which stories struck you as particularly implausible?" Before Hayes could respond, Foster nodded toward the flowers. "Those are for Blackwater, aren't they? Today's the anniversary." Michael's fingers tightened almost imperceptibly around his glass. The bar seemed to quiet around them, conversations dropping to murmurs. "I've studied the file. What isn't redacted," Foster continued. 6 operators, 300 hostiles, 73 civilians extracted. The tactics are still taught, but there's so much they don't tell us." He hesitated. "I'd consider it an honor to hear what really happened, from someone who was there." Michael's gaze drifted to the flowers, then back to Foster. The silence stretched until it seemed he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of a decision made after long consideration. "What do you know about the M24 SWS?" Foster blinked at the apparent non sequitur. "Standard issue sniper weapon system, Remington 700 action, 308 Winchester round, effective range about 800 meters." Michael nodded slightly. And how would you adjust for a 20 meps crosswind at 800 meters with a 175 grain BTHP round in 85-degree heat at 5,000 feet elevation? Foster hesitated, calculations running behind his eyes. 11.5 minutes of angle windage, assuming constant wind, Hayes answered instead, her voice steady and confident. Plus about 2 MOA elevation adjustment for density altitude, but you'd need to allow for wind gusts in valley terrain like Kunar Province. Michael turned his full attention to Hayes, reassessment visible in his gaze. Your specialty? Scout sniper course, top of class, she replied without boasting, before transferring to the SEALs. Something shifted in Michael's demeanor. Not warmth exactly, but recognition. He gestured to the empty stools beside him. 15 years ago today, I led a 6-person team into what should have been a straightforward extraction. The SEALs exchanged glances before taking seats. Around the bar, conversations quieted further as veterans recognized the beginning of a story rarely told. Before I start, Michael said, understand that I've never shared this with anyone outside Delta. Not because it's classified, though parts still are, but because some memories are like unexploded ordnance. Best left undisturbed. He took a measured sip of bourbon. Operation Blackwater, June 2008, Afghanistan's Kunar Province. 6 of us inserted by MH-47 under cover of darkness to extract 73 civilians, medical personnel and their families, from a compound about to be overrun. The bar had gone completely silent now. Even the music seemed to have faded into the background. Intel said light resistance, 20, maybe 30 Taliban fighters with small arms. Michael's voice took on the rhythm of a mission briefing. Intel was wrong. He closed his eyes briefly, and when he opened them, he was seeing something far beyond the walls of Anchor Point Bar. We hit the ground 2 clicks out, perfect insertion. No indication our arrival had been detected. Thomas Carter, our sniper, set up on the ridge south of the compound while the rest of us moved in. James Martinez, our medic, David Chen, communications, Sarah Reynolds, intelligence, and Robert Jackson, demolitions. Michael's right hand rested on the bar, the scarred knuckles and slight stiffness telling their own story of past violence. We reached the outer perimeter at 0200. No resistance. That should have been our first warning. His voice dropped slightly. Chen reported comm interference. Second warning. Reynolds thought she saw movement on the north ridge. Third warning. But the mission parameters were clear. Those people needed extraction before dawn. Foster and his team leaned in. Professional interest evident in their focused expressions. Around the bar, veterans recognized the cadence of a combat narrative, the methodical recounting of moments when life and death balanced on split-second decisions. We breached the compound at 2:15, found the civilians huddled in the main building, medical staff and families from a humanitarian organization. That's when Carter radioed from his position. Michael paused, taking another sip of bourbon. You've got company, he said. Lots of company. Michael's eyes refocused on the present, looking directly at Hayes. 300 Taliban fighters with heavy weapons had surrounded the compound while we were inside. It wasn't a random patrol. It wasn't bad timing. It was a trap, and we'd walked right into it. The door swung open again, and a large figure filled the frame. A man in his 60s with the unmistakable bearing of former Spetsnaz. His close-cropped gray hair and scarred face contrasted with his expensive civilian clothes. Behind him stood 2 younger men with the alert posture of security professionals. Every military person in the room instinctively assessed the newcomer, tension ratcheting up another notch. Viktor Petrov, Michael said, without turning. I thought you were still running mercenaries in Syria. The Russian's face split into a predatory smile. Ghost Sullivan, I heard you were dead. His accent was still pronounced despite decades in the West. Seems we were both misinformed. Petrov approached the bar, his security staying near the door. He nodded to Jake, who served him vodka without being asked. Telling war stories, Ghost? Petrov raised his glass. To Operation Blackwater. when you Americans learned that not all battles can be won with superior firepower. Michael's expression remained unchanged, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes. What brings you to San Diego, Victor? Business opportunities, private security contracts. Petrov sipped his vodka. But imagine my surprise when I hear the ghost surgeon drinks at this establishment. The man who single-handedly evacuated 73 civilians while surrounded by Taliban forces I was consulting for. A ripple of realization moved through the bar. Petrov had been on the other side of that firefight. If you're telling Blackwater stories, Petrov continued, are you telling the real version or the official one? Because they are very different tales. Before Michael could respond, the door opened once more. Colonel William Anderson, 62 and still ramrod straight despite civilian clothes, entered with Rear Admiral James Morrison, a compact, powerful man whose silver hair and weathered face spoke of decades at sea. Morrison's eyes found Michael immediately. I thought we might find you here today, Sullivan. The air in the bar seemed to thicken with unspoken history. These were not men who appeared by coincidence. Morrison approached, nodding to Foster and Hayes before focusing on Michael. I think it's time they heard the truth, Michael, about Blackwater. About why you were sent in with insufficient intelligence against overwhelming odds. Michael's expression hardened. Sir, with respect, it's been 15 years, Morrison interrupted quietly. The official report is still redacted, but these people deserve to know what they're really serving. He glanced at the SEALs, especially those following in your footsteps. Michael studied Morrison for a long moment, before nodding once. He turned to the SEALs, his voice taking on a harder edge. Blackwater wasn't just about extracting civilians. There was a secondary objective, an encrypted hard drive containing evidence of U.S. weapons being funneled to extremist groups through corrupt officials. His gaze shifted to Petrov. Officials working with Russian private military contractors. Petrov shrugged, unperturbed. Business is business. Someone betrayed us, Michael continued, his voice cold with old anger. My team was deliberately inserted into a kill box with outdated intelligence. We were meant to die there, along with those 73 civilians and whatever they might have witnessed. The blunt assertion hung in the air. Foster and Hayes exchanged glances, processing the implications of a mission designed to fail. But you didn't die, Hayes said, breaking the silence. You got everyone out. Michael's eyes held a darkness that made her straighten unconsciously. No, Captain. I didn't get everyone out. I was the only one who made it back. And for 15 years, I've been asking myself who set us up to die in that valley. He looked at the flowers on the bar, 5 blossoms in military formation. And why? The lights in Anchor Point Bar seemed to dim as Michael Sullivan continued his story, his voice dropping to ensure only those gathered close could hear. Foster and his SEAL team had formed a protective semicircle, their bodies instinctively creating a secure perimeter around a man they'd only just met but instantly respected. The moment we realized we were surrounded, standard protocol dictated immediate extraction, Michael explained, his hands sketching positions on the bar top with military precision. But the LZ was already compromised. 300 Taliban fighters with RPGs, DSHK heavy machine guns, and mortars had established overlapping fields of fire covering every approach. He paused, taking a sip of bourbon, the methodical pace of his narrative revealing the tactician beneath the surgeon's hands. Carter maintained his sniper position on the ridge, providing overwatch and intelligence. His first transmission confirmed our worst fears. Multiple technicals approaching from the east. Heavy weapons mounted. You've got 30 minutes, maybe less, before they bring those guns to bear. Colonel Anderson leaned forward, his weathered face betraying no emotion but his eyes never leaving Michael's hands as they mapped out the battlefield. We established a defensive perimeter using the compound's stone walls. The civilians were terrified, medical staff, their families, including 14 children. Michael's voice softened almost imperceptibly. Among them was Adam, an 8-year-old boy, and his 6-year-old sister Sophie. Their father was the head physician. Petrov watched with an inscrutable expression, vodka untouched before him. Martinez began organizing the civilians, medical training kicking in. Chen tried to establish comms for emergency extraction but kept hitting interference. Reynolds secured the hard drive, a nondescript black box recovered from a hidden compartment in the medical director's office. Jackson started laying charges at choke points, creating our exit strategy. Michael's right hand flexed unconsciously, the old injury making itself known. At 0243, they hit us with the first mortar barrage. Precision targeting, not ranging shots. They knew exactly where we were. His eyes met Morrison's briefly. That's when we knew someone had given them our operational details. 3 direct hits on the north wall. Martinez caught shrapnel protecting 2 children. He fell silent for a moment. Around the bar, veterans recognized the pause, the mental toll of revisiting moments when comrades fell. Martinez was our first casualty, femoral artery. He bled out in 90 seconds, still trying to instruct me on treating the children he'd shielded. Michael's clinical tone couldn't fully mask the emotion beneath. The children survived without a scratch. Hayes's expression had lost its skepticism, replaced by the solemn understanding of a soldier hearing another's combat truth. The next 4 hours were textbook small unit tactics against superior forces. Carter provided precision fire from his position, eliminating Taliban leadership whenever they emerged. Chen finally established comms with CENTCOM, but the earliest extraction window was dawn, 3 hours away. We needed to move before then. Michael's hands outlined new positions on the bar. Jackson laid his charges to create a diversion on the east wall while we planned to move the civilians west toward a ravine that could provide cover for 2 kilometers. Reynolds had already mapped the route while downloading data from the hard drive. That's when the second barrage hit. The rhythmic precision of Michael's narrative conveyed the chaos of battle more effectively than any dramatization. Chen was killed instantly. Direct mortar hit to his position. Jackson took fire covering our retreat. Multiple GSWs to the chest. Reynolds was wounded covering the first group of civilians moving toward the ravine. Michael paused, looking at Morrison. That's when I made the call. The mission parameters specified the hard drive as priority 1. Standard protocol would have been to secure the intelligence and extract, leaving the civilians for a subsequent mission. Admiral Morrison's face remained impassive, but his eyes reflected old pain. I chose differently, Michael said simply. Reynolds gave me the hard drive, told me what she'd found. Evidence linking several high-ranking American and Russian officials to weapons shipments that had ended up in Taliban hands. Then she took Carter's secondary weapon and held position to cover our retreat. Last thing she said was, "Make it count, Ghost." The bar had gone completely silent. Even the ambient music seemed to have faded to nothing. Carter maintained his overwatch position as I led the civilians toward the ravine. We made it halfway when Taliban forces breached the west section. Carter's rifle fire bought us precious minutes, but they were closing in from 3 directions. Michael's voice remained steady, but his eyes had taken on the 1,000-yard stare familiar to every combat veteran. I got on comms with Carter, told him to exfil to our secondary rendezvous point. His response, "Negative, Ghost. I've got eyes on you and multiple tangos closing. Maintaining overwatch." That was Thomas. By the book until the book needed to be thrown out. Foster nodded almost imperceptibly, recognizing the bond between operators that transcended protocol. The Taliban started taking precision fire from Carter's position, but for every fighter he dropped, 3 more appeared. They identified his position 20 minutes later. Michael's knuckles whitened around his glass. I heard the firefight over comms. Carter held them off for 12 minutes, confirmed 37 kills before they overwhelmed his position. Michael took another sip of bourbon. His last transmission. "They've got me, Ghost. Hard drive is priority. Get those people out." Then I heard him fire his remaining rounds. Not at the enemy, into his equipment, destroying anything that could be used against us. Hayes closed her eyes briefly, a soldier's respect for a clean end. That left me, 73 civilians, and a critical intelligence asset, surrounded by Taliban forces who'd just eliminated 5 of America's most elite operators. Michael looked at Foster. The exfil helicopter was still 90 minutes out, and I had to move these people 2 kilometers through hostile territory to reach the new LZ. Petrov spoke for the first time since Michael had begun his detailed account. Your Carter took 17 of my men with him before he fell. Professional respect. He raised his vodka slightly. When we found his position, we understood why they called you ghosts. He had relocated 3 times while wounded, leaving false trails each time. Michael acknowledged this with the barest nod. Enemies recognizing skilled adversaries across battle lines. I organized the civilians into groups, each led by medical personnel with emergency training. Distributed what weapons and comms we had left. Sophie, the 6-year-old, had taken shrapnel in her leg. Not life-threatening, but she couldn't walk. Her brother Adam refused to leave her. For the first time, Michael's voice softened slightly. I'll be brave, sir, he kept saying. I'll be brave like you. 8 years old. Trying to comfort a Delta operator while his world fell apart. Michael refocused on the tactical narrative. I carried both children as we moved west, using the ravine for cover. The remaining civilians followed in staggered formations. We took fire 3 times during the movement. Lost 4 civilians to sniper fire. Precision shots that suggested specialized training. His gaze shifted briefly to Petrov, who neither confirmed nor denied the implication. We reached the new LZ at Oro 623, dawn breaking, helicopter inbound. That's when I saw them. A ridge position to our north, perfect for an ambush. I left the children with the main group and moved to investigate. Michael's breathing changed subtly, the first sign that he was approaching the most difficult part of his story. I found 5 men in U.S. military gear, setting up crew-served weapons overlooking our LZ. Not Taliban. Americans. Black Ops. No insignia. He looked directly at Colonel Anderson. Led by Colonel Frank Harris. Anderson's face betrayed nothing, but Morrison's jaw tightened. I approached them, identified myself. Harris seemed surprised to see me alive. He asked about the hard drive immediately. Not the civilians, not my team. When I told him I had it, he ordered me to hand it over, said the helicopter was coming for the asset, not the civilians. Michael's voice had gone completely flat, the emotional shutdown of recounting ultimate betrayal. I refused, told him 73 non-combatants, including 14 children, needed immediate evacuation. Harris made it clear. The helicopter had limited capacity. The hard drive and its handlers were priority. The civilians were expendable. Foster's team shifted uncomfortably, the concept of abandoning non-combatants anathema to their training. I made another choice, Michael continued. I argued. Harris didn't take it well. When I turned to leave, to rejoin the civilians, he paused. I felt the impact before I heard the shot. Harris had given the order to fire on me. A fellow American soldier. The revelation hung in the air like a thunderclap. Hayes actually flinched, the violation of core military principles striking deep. I took 2 rounds to the back. Not immediately fatal, but debilitating. I managed to return fire, training taking over. Created enough chaos to escape back to the civilians. I was losing blood rapidly, but the helicopter was 3 minutes out. Michael's hand moved unconsciously to his lower back, tracing old wounds. I got the civilians organized for rapid evacuation, prioritizing children and wounded. Adam and Sophie were among the last group. I was compromised by then. Blood loss, shock setting in. The helicopter touched down under fire from both Taliban positions and Harris's team. His voice remained clinically detached, as if describing a particularly complex surgery rather than his own near-death experience. I remember carrying Adam and Sophie to the helicopter, taking additional fire, using my body to shield them. After that, fragments. Waking briefly during medevac, coded twice according to the medical report. 17 wounds from bullets, shrapnel, and blast effects. They pronounced me dead on arrival at the field hospital. Michael looked at Admiral Morrison. Officially, I died that day. Ghost surgeon became just a ghost. Morrison nodded slowly. The official report listed Lieutenant Colonel Michael Sullivan as KIA. The hard drive was never recovered. The mission was classified as a catastrophic failure with all operators lost, but with successful civilian extraction, a miracle attributed to the sacrifice of the team. "But you survived," Foster said quietly. "I was placed in a secure medical facility under an assumed identity," Michael confirmed. 8 months of surgeries and rehabilitation. When I was finally stable, Admiral Morrison visited me, told me what had happened after I died. Morrison took over the narrative. Harris reported that Taliban forces had ambushed the LZ, claimed he arrived too late to save Sullivan, but managed to extract the civilians. The hard drive was supposedly destroyed in the firefight. "But you had the hard drive," Hayes deduced, her tactical mind following the threads. Michael nodded. "I'd secured it in Sophie's teddy bear before loading her on the helicopter. 8-year-old Adam had been instructed to give it only to someone wearing this." Michael touched a Naval Academy ring on his finger. "When they reached safety." "Smart," Foster murmured. "The data on that drive implicated 12 high-ranking officials in a weapons smuggling operation that had armed the same extremists we were fighting," Morrison continued. "Harris was their cleanup crew. Sullivan and his team had stumbled onto something they were never meant to find, and Harris was sent to ensure none of them returned to tell the tale." Petrov chuckled darkly. "Politics and war, always messy bedfellows." Michael studied the Russian. "You were there too, not just consulting. You were commanding the specialized units, the ones with formal sniper training." "Business arrangement," Petrov shrugged. "Though I must admit, we could have killed 200 American soldiers that day. But even my men would not fire on a man carrying children." His eyes narrowed. "We are mercenaries, Sullivan, not monsters." Michael's gaze remained cold. "Tell that to Martinez, to Carter, to Chen, Jackson, and Reynolds." Petrov accepted the rebuke with a slight inclination of his head. "What happened to Harris?" Foster asked, professional interest in his voice. "Promoted," Michael replied bitterly. "The weapons smuggling network was partially dismantled, sacrificing smaller players while protecting those with real power. The evidence I recovered was selectively utilized." Morrison's weathered face showed old regret. "Politics outranked justice. By the time I could have done anything, the trail had gone cold. Harris was untouchable, protected by powerful interests." "And you?" Hayes asked Michael. "I was given a choice," Michael replied. "Return to duty under a new identity, or leave the service with full medical benefits and a cover story explaining my injuries. I chose a third option. Medical school," Foster realized. Michael nodded. "I'd had field medical training, and Martinez had taught me more during our deployments. I decided if I couldn't serve as I had before, I'd find another way to save lives instead of taking them." The symmetry wasn't lost on anyone present. The elite operator becoming a surgeon, turning instruments of war into instruments of healing. "So why tell this story now?" Hayes asked, her initial skepticism completely gone. "After 15 years of silence?" Michael looked at the flowers on the bar again, his expression shifting from remembrance to something harder. "Because 3 days ago, I received a message from Adam." The statement hung in the air, its significance apparent to everyone listening. "Adam is 23 now," Morrison explained, "followed in his father's footsteps. Runs a medical clinic in Afghanistan with his sister Sophie. 3 days ago, he was abducted by what appears to be a Taliban splinter group. They've threatened public execution in 72 hours. Foster straightened. "Rescue op?" "Not officially sanctioned," Anderson interjected, speaking for the first time. "The situation is politically complex." Michael's eyes never left Petrov. "But it's not Taliban, is it, Victor? The men who took Adam, they're yours." The bar seemed to freeze. Petrov's security personnel tensed, hands moving subtly toward concealed weapons. "Not mine," Petrov replied calmly. "Though I know who they work for. The same people who were never brought to justice 15 years ago." He leaned forward. "The boy found something, didn't he? Something that reopens old wounds." Michael's silence was confirmation enough. "History repeating," Petrov observed. "But this time, Ghost, you are not alone." He gestured to Foster and his team. "You have new ghosts to help you haunt those who deserve it." Foster looked at Michael, decision already made in his eyes. Just tell us when and where, sir. Michael studied the younger man. This isn't your fight, Commander. With respect, Foster replied. Anyone who abandons civilians and shoots their own operators made it every American soldier's fight. Hayes nodded in firm agreement. We're in. Admiral Morrison exchanged glances with Anderson. Officially, we know nothing about this conversation. Unofficially, he slid a thumb drive across the bar to Michael. Satellite imagery, intelligence reports, and transport arrangements. What you do with this information is, of course, entirely your decision as a private citizen. Michael picked up the thumb drive, his expression unreadable. 15 years of questions, of pain, of wondering who had betrayed his team, all coming to a head in a mission he'd never expected to undertake again. Harris is involved, he said. Not a question. Morrison nodded once. Now a brigadier general. Still has powerful friends. But not as many as he thinks, Anderson added quietly. Not everyone values expediency over honor. Michael pocketed the thumb drive, his decision made before he'd even entered the bar that evening. He'd known somehow that this day would come, that the ghosts of Blackwater would never rest until justice was served. Wheels up in 6 hours, he said simply. I'll brief you en route. Petrov drained his vodka and stood. You will need someone who knows the terrain, someone who understands how these contractors operate. Michael's eyes narrowed. You're offering to help? I owe you a life, Sullivan, Petrov replied. In my culture, such debts must be repaid. He placed a business card on the bar. And contrary to what you might think, I do not condone the targeting of medical personnel or children. There are lines even mercenaries should not cross. As Petrov moved toward the door, his security detail falling in behind him, he paused. Besides, I have unfinished business with General Harris myself. He failed to honor certain financial agreements 15 years ago. After the Russian departed, Morrison looked at Michael with concern. Can he be trusted? Absolutely not, Michael replied without hesitation, but he'll be where I can see him. He turned to Foster and Hayes. Last chance to reconsider. This isn't sanctioned. If things go wrong, there's no official support, no extraction. Foster straightened, speaking for his team. All due respect, sir, but we didn't join to follow safe orders. We joined to do what's right. For the first time that evening, Michael Sullivan smiled, a hard expression that transformed his face from that of a surgeon back to the operator he'd once been. The ghost of Blackwater, awakening after 15 years of slumber. Then, let's go bring Adam home. Afghanistan's Hindu Kush Mountains remained eternal sentinels, unchanged by the 15 years since Michael Sullivan had last navigated their treacherous slopes. The unmarked cargo plane descended through cloud cover toward a makeshift landing strip, officially abandoned but mysteriously operational for this one night. Michael stood near the jump door, his surgeon's hands now gloved for combat rather than healing. At 58, he should have felt out of place in tactical gear. Yet his body remembered, muscle memory responding to the familiar weight of equipment, the anticipation of controlled violence. He wore no insignia, no flag, nothing that could identify him if things went wrong. Foster's team had transformed during the 12-hour flight from casual SEAL officers to the precision instruments they truly were. Hayes checked her rifle with methodical efficiency, her earlier skepticism replaced by focused determination. The remaining 4 SEALs, Jenkins, Rodriguez, Patel, and Wilson, moved with the synchronized awareness of men who had trained together through countless operations. Petrov sat apart, speaking quietly in Russian to 3 men he'd somehow managed to assemble on short notice, mercenaries with the hard eyes and economical movements of experienced contractors. Final equipment check, Michael announced as the plane began its descent. Comms test. Each operator verified their communications equipment, establishing the tactical network that would keep them synchronized during the operation. Michael felt the old rhythms returning. Tactical planning pushing aside the doctor he'd become. Mission parameters remain unchanged, he continued, voice pitched to Carey without shouting. This is a precision extraction, not an assault. We locate Adam, verify Sophie's status, and withdraw with minimal engagement. Intel suggests 19 hostiles on site, potentially more in reserve. The plane touched down with a jolt, rolling to a stop at the far end of the strip where 3 unmarked vehicles waited. As the ramp lowered, cold mountain air rushed in, carrying the distinctive scent of Afghanistan, dust, pine, and the lingering memories of decades of conflict. Colonel Anderson emerged from the lead vehicle, his civilian clothes replaced by unmarked tactical gear. "Ground intel update," he said without preamble. "Target is being held at a compound 20 clicks northeast. Former police outpost. Satellite confirms 18 heat signatures on night watch. More inside." Michael nodded, accepting the tablet Anderson handed him. The thermal imagery showed guard rotations, potential entry points, and the likely holding area, a reinforced room on the compound's north side. "Not Taliban standard procedure," Petrov observed, looking over Michael's shoulder. "These are professionals. Organized defenses, overlapping fields of fire." "Contractors," Anderson confirmed. "Like yours, but without the professional courtesy." Petrov smiled thinly at the barb. "My men follow codes. These," he gestured at the tablet, "dogs without leashes." Michael studied the compound layout, memories overlapping with current intelligence. Similar construction to the Blackwater compound. Same region, different valley. His finger traced potential approaches. They're expecting aerial assault. Lookouts positioned for maximum visibility of approach vectors. "So we don't fly in," Foster concluded. "We drive," Michael confirmed. "Humanitarian medical team responding to a request for assistance. Gets us to the outer perimeter. From there, we improvise." Hayes raised an eyebrow. "They'll check credentials." "They'll get credentials," Anderson replied, nodding toward a case in the vehicle. "Legitimate WHO identification and mission paperwork. By the time they verify it's not authentic, you'll already be inside." The teams loaded into vehicles. Weathered SUVs with medical insignia hastily applied. Michael took the passenger seat of the lead vehicle, Foster driving, with Hayes and Petrov in the back. The remaining operators distributed themselves between the other vehicles, weapons concealed but accessible. As they pulled away from the airstrip, Michael's gaze found the mountains silhouetted against the night sky. 15 years had passed, but these peaks remained unchanged, indifferent to human conflict, to life and death played out in their shadows. "You've been quiet," Foster observed as they navigated the rough mountain road. Michael continued scanning the terrain. "Last time I was here, I left with 17 wounds and 5 dead friends." Foster nodded, understanding that some memories needed no elaboration. "Tell me about Adam," Hayes said from the back seat. "What kind of man would build a medical clinic in Taliban territory?" For the first time, something like pride touched Michael's expression. His father died 3 years after Blackwater. Cancer. Adam was 11, Sophie 9. They were relocated to the States, received excellent education through a foundation for war orphans. His voice softened slightly. He could have become anything, surgeon in Boston, researcher at Johns Hopkins. Instead, he returned to the country that took his father, determined to provide medical care where it's most needed. "Brave," Hayes commented. "Foolish," Petrov countered, "but admirable." The convoy wound higher into the mountains, headlights cutting through darkness that seemed to press in from all sides. Michael's hand moved unconsciously to his lower back, where the scars from Harris's bullets remained, a permanent reminder of betrayal. 5 kilometers to checkpoint, Foster announced, slowing as they approached a crude roadblock manned by local militia. "Medical credentials ready," Michael instructed. "Remember, we're doctors responding to an outbreak of respiratory illness. Humanitarian mission only." The checkpoint guards waved them through after a cursory inspection of their documents, the universal respect for medical personnel working in their favor. As they pulled away, Hayes released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "That was easy." "Too easy," Petrov muttered. "They were expecting us." Michael nodded grimly. "Not as hostiles, as potential hostages." He pointed to a distant ridge where movement caught his eye. "Spotters tracking our approach. They're letting us in." Foster accelerated slightly, his expression hardening. "So we're driving into a trap." "Yes," Michael confirmed. But traps work both ways. They expect doctors with minimal security, not operators prepared for ambush. They rounded a bend, and the compound came into view. Stone walls surrounding several buildings, lights illuminating a courtyard where armed men patrolled with assault rifles. A red cross flag flew incongruously over the main gate, the pretense of a medical facility maintained for satellite observation. 18 guards visible, Hayes reported quietly, scanning through compact binoculars. Standard patrol pattern, two-man teams, 15-minute rotations. The boy is in the north building, Petrov said with certainty. Reinforced structure, single access point, where I would keep high-value prisoners. Michael studied the compound, comparing it to the satellite imagery. Something felt wrong. The security too obvious, too conventional. After 15 years as a surgeon, he'd learned to trust his instincts when a patient presented symptoms that didn't align with the expected diagnosis. Change of plan, he announced. They're expecting us through the main gate. We won't give them what they expect. For the next 20 minutes, Michael outlined a modified approach that utilized both his memories of similar compounds and Foster's specialized SEAL training. By the time they parked the vehicles a kilometer from the compound, each operator understood their role in the precision extraction. As they conducted final equipment checks, Michael addressed the assembled team, a mix of SEALs, mercenaries, and a surgeon returning to combat one last time. This isn't about revenge, he said, voice carrying in the mountain air. It's about bringing home a young man who chose to help others when he could have chosen safety. About honoring a promise made 15 years ago to a brave 8-year-old boy. He looked each operator in the eye, measuring their resolve. Any questions? Finding none, he gave a single nod. Move out. The approach was textbook, utilizing terrain features for concealment, maintaining strict noise discipline, each operator moving with the fluid efficiency of extensive training. Michael felt decades fall away as his body recalled patterns of movement ingrained through countless operations. They reached the compound's blind spot, a section where the terrain created a natural shadow invisible to perimeter guards. Rodriguez, Foster's demolition specialist, placed shaped charges designed to create an entry point without casualties. Precision rather than destruction. Charges set, Rodriguez confirmed quietly. Remote detonation ready. Michael activated his comm link. Phase 1 initiated. All teams stand by. At his signal, Rodriguez triggered the breaching charges. The controlled explosion was barely audible, more pressure than sound, creating a precise opening in the compound wall. Simultaneously, Petrov's team initiated a diversion at the eastern perimeter, enough commotion to draw attention without revealing their true intentions. Michael led the entry team through the breach, moving with practiced efficiency despite years away from combat. Hayes followed, then Foster, their weapons ready but disciplined. This was extraction, not assault. They encountered the first guards 60 seconds after entry, 2 men responding to the eastern diversion. Michael moved without hesitation, utilizing close-quarters combat techniques that had never truly left his muscle memory. The guard dropped silently, subdued rather than killed. Hayes handled the second with similar efficiency. 2 tangos down, non-lethal, Foster reported quietly into his comm. Proceeding to target building. They crossed the darkened courtyard, using shadows and timing to avoid the remaining patrols. The north building loomed before them, solid construction with a single reinforced door and narrow windows designed to prevent exactly this type of infiltration. Thermal confirms 4 heat signatures inside, Patel reported from his overwatch position. 1 stationary near center, likely the target. 3 others moving in patrol pattern. Michael signaled Foster, who produced specialized breaching tools designed for silent entry. The lock mechanism yielded to expert manipulation, the door opening without sound to reveal a dimly lit corridor. The interior smelled of cigarettes and gun oil, the universal scent of mercenaries on extended deployment. They moved through the structure with practiced precision, neutralizing 1 guard at a junction of hallways. The second patrol they avoided entirely, timing their movement to exploit blind spots in coverage. The central room appeared to be a former office, its door heavier than the others, metal reinforced with a viewing slot. Michael approached cautiously, Hayes covering as Foster prepared to breach. Through the slot, Michael caught a glimpse of a figure seated in the center of the room, a young man with dark hair and the distinctive features of Afghan-American heritage. His wrists were secured to the chair arms, but his posture remained defiant despite visible bruising on his face. Something in Michael's chest tightened at the sight. The 8-year-old boy who had promised to be brave had kept that promise through to adulthood. Foster made quick work of the lock, and they entered to find Adam looking up with surprise that quickly turned to recognition. "Dr. Sullivan." His voice was hoarse but steady. "They said you were coming, but I didn't believe them." Michael moved swiftly to cut the restraints. "We need to move. Where's Sophie?" "Separate building," Adam replied, rubbing circulation back into his wrists. "West side, with the other medical staff. They're unharmed, valuable hostages." Hayes checked the corridor. "Clear for now, but we need to move before the next patrol." Michael helped Adam to his feet, assessing his condition with a surgeon's eye. "Can you walk?" "I'll manage." The young man's determination echoed across 15 years of memory. Foster activated his comm. "Package 1 secured, moving to secondary objective." They retraced their path through the building, Adam moving remarkably well for someone who'd been in captivity. As they approached the exit, Michael's instincts flared. The corridors too empty. The extraction too clean. "Hold," he whispered, raising his fist. "Something's wrong." The lights flashed on, flooding the corridor with harsh brightness. From both ends, armed men appeared, weapons trained on the extraction team. From a side room stepped a figure Michael hadn't seen in 15 years, but would have recognized anywhere. Brigadier General Frank Harris, now in his 60s, but still carrying himself with the arrogant authority that had once ordered Michael's death. "Michael Sullivan," Harris said, looking genuinely surprised. "The rumors were true. You survived Blackwater." Michael positioned himself between Harris and Adam, tactical mind already calculating odds, angles, potential responses. "Harris," he acknowledged flatly, "still hiding behind other men's guns?" Harris smiled without warmth. "And you're still predictable, Ghost. The moment we grabbed the boy, I knew you'd come. Some lessons are never learned." "You shot me in the back," Michael stated, voice devoid of emotion. "Tried to leave 73 civilians to die. 15 years isn't long enough to forget that." Foster and Hayes had positioned themselves strategically, creating a defensive triangle around Adam. Michael could sense their tension, the situation deteriorating with each passing second. Harris shrugged. "War requires difficult decisions. Nothing personal." "It was to my team," Michael replied. "To the 5 Americans you helped kill." Harris's expression hardened. "Your team stumbled onto something they shouldn't have. You were never supposed to find that hard drive. Never supposed to see what was on it." He gestured to the armed men surrounding them. "And now, history repeats itself. The boy found new evidence, financial records linking current officials to ongoing weapons programs. Some secrets need to remain buried, Michael." Adam spoke up from behind Michael. "People are dying because of those weapons. Children, families. Someone has to expose the truth." "Brave like your father," Harris commented dismissively. "Equally foolish." Michael assessed their options. Outnumbered, outgunned, caught in a prepared trap. But unlike Blackwater, he wasn't alone this time. His comm unit remained active, the rest of their team hearing everything. "What happens now, General?" Michael asked, buying time. "You can't exactly report capturing a surgeon and a Navy SEAL team on an unauthorized rescue mission." Harris smiled coldly. "Tragic terrorist incident. American medical personnel killed despite valiant rescue attempt. National heroes lost in service to their country. The story writes itself." In the momentary silence that followed, Michael heard it. The faint sound of suppressed gunfire from elsewhere in the compound. Petrov's team, moving on the west building to extract Sophie and the medical staff. "You still don't understand, do you?" Michael said, keeping Harris's attention focused on him. "Blackwater taught me something important. Something you never learned in your climb to general." Harris raised an eyebrow, curiosity momentarily overriding caution. Never fight alone, Michael finished. The lights went out, plunging the corridor into darkness. Simultaneously, flashbang grenades detonated at both ends of the hallway, Jenkins and Wilson executing the contingency plan perfectly. In the confusion, Michael grabbed Adam and pulled him down, covering him with his body as Foster and Hayes engaged the disoriented guards. The firefight was brief but intense. Disciplined operators against mercenaries caught unprepared. When emergency lighting activated 30 seconds later, Harris was gone, but his men were neutralized. "We need to move," Foster urged. "They'll have reinforcements." Michael helped Adam up. "Sophie first." They exited the building into coordinated chaos. Petrov's diversionary attack had escalated into a full engagement on the eastern perimeter, drawing attention away from the western building where Sophie and the medical staff were held. "West building secure," came Petrov's accented voice over the comm. "Medical personnel safe, moving to extraction point Alpha." Foster led the way across the compound, Michael and Adam following with Hayes providing rear security. They encountered minimal resistance, most guards drawn to the eastern firefight. At the western building, they found Petrov with Sophie, now a poised young woman of 21, and 12 medical staff, a mix of Afghan and international personnel. The reunion between siblings was brief but emotional, Sophie embracing her brother with the intensity of someone who had feared never seeing him again. "Dr. Sullivan," she said, recognition and gratitude in her eyes. "Adam said you'd come." Michael nodded, the pressure in his chest tightening at the echo of a promise made 15 years earlier. "We need to move. Vehicles are 1 click west." As they organized the medical personnel for evacuation, an explosion rocked the eastern section of the compound. Through the comms came Rodriguez's voice, tight with controlled urgency. "Be advised, enemy reinforcements arriving. Technical vehicles with mounted weapons, multiple hostiles." Foster checked his ammunition. "We need to move now." The evacuation proceeded with organized urgency, Petrov's men taking point, Foster's SEALs securing the flanks, Michael and Hayes shepherding the medical personnel. They had almost reached the breach point when gunfire erupted from a guard tower that had remained silent throughout the operation. Michael recognized the tactical shift immediately, a prepared fallback position, likely Harris's insurance. The precision fire separated the medical personnel from their security, forcing the operators to seek cover. From his position behind a low stone wall, Michael spotted movement. Harris himself, moving toward an idling vehicle near the main gate, 2 guards providing cover. "Harris is escaping," he reported over comms. "East gate, black SUV." Foster's voice came back immediately. "We're pinned down, can't pursue." Michael made a decision. "Maintain protection of the medical staff. I'm going after Harris." Before Foster could object, Michael was moving, utilizing terrain and shadow as he circled toward the east gate. The discipline of thousands of operations guided his movements, keeping him invisible as he closed the distance. Harris had reached the vehicle, his guards scanning for threats. They never saw Michael approach from their blind spot. The first guard went down silently, a precision strike to the base of the skull. The second turned in time to raise his weapon before Michael disarmed him with practiced efficiency. Harris was half inside the vehicle when Michael's voice stopped him. 15 years, Frank. Did you think I'd forget?" The general turned, drawing his sidearm with surprising speed for his age. But Michael had anticipated the move, already closing the distance. The pistol discharged once, the round passing harmlessly over Michael's shoulder as he locked Harris's arm and forced the weapon from his grip. Harris fought with the desperation of a man who knew exactly what capture meant. The end of his career, his freedom, his carefully constructed life. But Michael had the cold precision of a surgeon combined with operator training that had never truly left him. The struggle ended with Harris pinned against the vehicle, Michael's improvised restraint securing his wrists. "You should have killed me at Blackwater," Michael said quietly. "Your first mistake." Harris spat blood from a split lip. "You think this changes anything? The system protects itself. Always has. Always will." "Maybe," Michael acknowledged. "But Adam didn't just find financial records. He found your personal files, The ones documenting every illegal order, every assassination, every weapons shipment. Insurance against your partners turning on you. Harris's expression shifted from defiance to calculation. We can make a deal. No deals. Michael secured Harris in the vehicle's back seat. You're facing justice. The real kind, not the kind you arrange behind closed doors. As Michael took the driver's seat, his comm activated. Sullivan, report status, Foster's urgent voice demanded. Target secured, proceeding to extraction point. Be advised, hostile forces converging on your position. You have maybe 2 minutes. Michael started the engine. Copy that. See you at the rendezvous. He drove through the main gate, accelerating onto the rough mountain road. Behind him, gunfire continued to echo from the compound, Foster's team covering the medical personnel's withdrawal through their original entry point. In the back seat, Harris had regained his composure. You won't make it to the airstrip. My men have already alerted checkpoints. Every road is watched. Who said anything about roads? Michael replied, turning the vehicle onto a barely visible mountain trail, a route he'd memorized from the topographical maps during planning. The SUV bounced violently as it climbed, pushing the limits of its off-road capabilities. Michael drove with the focused intensity that had once made him one of Delta's most reliable operators, calculating angles, traction, and momentum with instinctive precision. You're insane, Harris muttered as the vehicle tilted precariously along a ridgeline drop-off. We'll both die on this mountain. Difference is, Michael replied calmly, I've made peace with that possibility. Have you? They crested a rise just as dawn began breaking over the Hindu Kush, painting the peaks in gold and crimson. Below them, Michael could see dust clouds rising from the compound, the firefight continuing as Foster's team executed their extraction. His comm crackled with Petrov's voice. Sullivan, medical personnel secure, proceeding to secondary extraction point. What is your status? On schedule, Michael replied, guiding the vehicle down a treacherous slope. Package secured. Understood. Payment received in full. Michael recognized the code phrase, Petrov confirming that Sophie and the other medical staff had reached safety. One burden lifted from his shoulders. The rendezvous point was a sheltered valley 5 kilometers from the compound. Too narrow for conventional aircraft, but perfect for the specialized extraction helicopter arranged by Admiral Morrison. As Michael brought the vehicle to a stop among concealing rock formations, he saw Foster's team already arriving on foot, Adam among them. Hayes approached the vehicle, her expression shifting from relief to cold satisfaction when she saw Harris secured in the back seat. The others? Michael asked. All accounted for, she confirmed. Petrov's team took some fire covering our retreat. 2 wounded, none critical. The sound of rotors echoed through the valley as a sleek, unmarked helicopter approached from the south, Admiral Morrison making good on his promise of extraction. As the helicopter touched down, kicking up swirls of dust, Michael turned to Harris. Time to answer for Blackwater, General. Harris studied him with the calculating gaze of a man still looking for angles, for escape. You know why I shot you, Sullivan. Not orders. Personal choice. You were the only one who could have exposed us. The only one I truly feared. His voice lowered. I recognize something in you. An integrity that couldn't be bought or broken. Dangerous. In our line of work. Michael said nothing as he escorted Harris to the helicopter. Some revelations came too late to matter. Foster supervised the loading of personnel. Adam, the remaining SEALs, and finally Petrov's mercenaries with their wounded. The Russian himself approached Michael with a slight limp, blood staining his pant leg. Flesh wound, he dismissed Michael's professional assessment. Souvenir of Afghanistan, to match the others. He glanced at Harris. You should have let me kill him. Cleaner. Michael shook his head. Justice, not vengeance. In my experience, they are often the same. Petrov extended his hand. But I respect your choice, Ghost Surgeon. Our debt is settled. As Petrov boarded the helicopter, Adam approached Michael, standing straighter despite the bruises on his face. At 23, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of a young man who had already faced his share of darkness. You came for me, he said simply. Just like before. Michael studied the young man, seeing echoes of the 8-year-old boy who had promised to be brave. I made a promise, Adam nodded, understanding the weight those words carried for men like Michael Sullivan. What happens now? To Harris? To the evidence? Justice, Michael replied. Admiral Morrison has arranged a secure channel to the appropriate authorities. The evidence you found, combined with Harris's files, is enough to break the entire network. Adam glanced at the helicopter, where Sophie waited. Our clinic will reopen, Michael assured him. With proper security this time. Morrison's already arranged it. The helicopter pilot signaled readiness for departure. As they walked toward it, Adam asked the question Michael had been expecting. You could have killed Harris? After what he did to your team? To you? Why didn't you? Michael paused, formulating an answer that encompassed 15 years of reflection, of moving from warrior to healer. Because we aren't defined by what we're forced to do in war, he finally said. We're defined by what we choose to do when we have choices. He looked at the younger man. Your father taught me that in a way. He chose to heal in a war zone. You've made the same choice. Adam nodded, understanding passing between them that transcended words. As they boarded the helicopter, Michael took a final look at the Afghan mountains, the setting for the darkest chapter of his life and now, perhaps, its resolution. Harris sat secured and silent, finally facing the consequences of decisions made 15 years earlier. Justice delayed, but not denied. The rotors accelerated, lifting the helicopter from the valley floor. Michael watched the landscape fall away, feeling a weight lifting with it, not gone completely, but lighter than it had been in 15 years. 6 months later, Michael Sullivan stood in his office at Bethesda Naval Hospital, reviewing resident evaluations. At 59, he had finally accepted the role of Chief of Trauma Surgery, a position he'd declined 3 times previously, preferring the direct work of saving lives to administrative responsibilities. A knock at his door interrupted his concentration. Foster and Hayes entered in civilian clothes, both looking more relaxed than he'd seen them in Afghanistan. Commander, Captain, he greeted them. Or is it off the record today? Foster smiled. Definitely off record, Doc. Just thought you'd want to know. Harris's trial concluded. Closed proceedings, but Morrison kept us informed. 25 to life. Michael nodded, satisfaction rather than triumph in his expression. And the others? 3 senior Pentagon officials, 2 State Department, and 4 defense contractors indicted, Hayes replied. The network's dismantled. For real, this time. Good, Michael said simply, returning to his paperwork. Foster exchanged glances with Hayes before continuing. There's something else. Your actions in Afghanistan? There's been discussion at the highest levels. Michael looked up, wariness in his eyes. They're reinstating your medals, Hayes explained. Full honors. Public ceremony if you want it. The president himself approved it. Michael's expression remained neutral. The medals were never the point. We know, Foster acknowledged. But for what it's worth, the story of Blackwater is being taught now. The real version. What you and your team did, the choices you made. It matters to those of us still serving. Michael accepted this with a slight nod, more affected than he cared to show. As they turned to leave, Hayes paused. Almost forgot. This came for you. Diplomatic pouch from Afghanistan. She handed him a sealed envelope before they departed, closing the door behind them. Michael opened the envelope to find a handwritten letter and a photograph. The image showed a newly rebuilt medical clinic with Adam and Sophie standing proudly before it, surrounded by staff and local children. Among them was a young boy, perhaps 6 years old, holding a hand-drawn picture of a soldier carrying children to safety. The letter was brief. Dr. Sullivan, the clinic reopened last month, already serving 300 patients weekly. Security is excellent, thank Admiral Morrison. Sophie has started a training program for local women to become healthcare workers. The boy in the photo is named Michael. His family walks 3 days to bring him for treatment of a congenital heart condition. When I told him who he was named after, he drew the picture he's holding. I am still being brave, sir, just as you taught me. With deepest gratitude, Adam Michael placed the photograph on his desk beside a simple vase holding 5 white lilies and a single blue forget-me-not, the same arrangement he'd placed at Anchor Point Bar every year on the anniversary of Blackwater. He touched the photograph briefly, then returned to his work. A surgeon once more, a ghost only in memory, finding peace in the lives he now saved rather than those he had once taken. The ghosts of Blackwater would always be with him, but now they brought comfort rather than pain. The comfort of promises kept and justice finally served. Outside his window, autumn leaves drifted across the hospital grounds where young doctors trained to save lives, unaware that their mentor had once been the ghost of Blackwater, a legend who had returned from death to ensure that courage and honor still meant something in a world that too often forgot their value.